Hi everybody, I'm going to share an experience, well a few experiences, personal experiences of past and very recent, and basically looking at professionalism as well and how people set great store by professionals, and how sometimes, well very often actually, non-professional people who nonetheless are informed are denigrated and pushed aside, and especially children, you know. So, and I'm talking about a child's natural intelligence, and I'm making this video to promote the child, that 2021 is the year of the child, the year where humanity finally starts to accept the fact that not only have we never fully understood our children, that our understanding of the in between, our relationships with children, our connection with children has been, we've got this set of middlemen called professionals, scientists and psychologists and what have you, politicians, standing in between the parent, the family and the child, you know, giving all kinds of dictates, even religious bodies, you know, beat your child regularly, you know, if you want them to grow up straight, as it were. This kind of stuff that has been coming in between the raising of a child, the natural understanding of children, has been pushed to one side, and that space invaded by a set of people who call themselves educated and they know best. They know best, you know, like Dr. Spock, for example. Now, what I'm going to share here, I think, is very, very insightful. So, about 8 or 9 years ago, I was at a party and I met a man there, had a chat with him, and he was telling me that he's a psychotherapist and he's just started using this new technique. It was a brand new technique at the time, and it had to do with rapid eye movement. And, you know, it's basically encouraging people to look at a dot and move their eyes around, and that for some reason they've discovered that this actually calms anxiety. And, you know, it does include, you know, thinking, visualising nice things and breathing in a particular way and all that kind of stuff, okay. So, and they'd only just started with this, and he's saying, we don't quite know how it works, but we know that it works. And I was absolutely delighted and very interested, because he had answered a question that I'd had since I was the age of 3. That is the earliest time I can remember as a child, that every night before I went to sleep, consciously I had to move my eyes around. So I'd close my eyes and I'd have to move my eyes up and down and side to side and round and up and down. And I had to do this so many times as a conscious effort every night before I went to sleep. And I remember as a child being puzzled about it, you know, wondering, why do I have to do this every night when I go to sleep? Is it normal? I can actually remember thinking that as a child, like, why do I need to do that? Now, I grew up in an extremely traumatic family environment. You know, my father was a very violent, abusive person, very aggressive, very moody. He was sexually abusing me from a very, you know, my early childhood. He was very aggressive and violent towards my little brother and my mum. And so what it was found is that people who, and this is what this psychotherapist had explained, that children and people who go through extreme trauma, they don't do this rapid eye movement. They don't go through that, you see. and that this rapid eye movement does have something to do with balancing the brain, healing the mind, as it were, so that one can function in the world. And so what astounded me, and I explained it to this man, that wow, that a 3-year-old child then instinctively knew how to do that, because I said to him I used to do that as a child, consciously, every night. And what you've just said to me has really astounded me, of the natural intelligence then of the human child. You know, I wasn't talking in an egotistical sense of like, oh, wasn't I magnificent and amazing as a child that I actually did that. It was more of, I saw myself just as a child among many children, and that somehow my brain knew that my body, through the trauma, was lacking the necessity of REM before going to sleep, and therefore was forcing me to do it consciously. Like, it had to be a conscious effort. You must do this. Okay? Now, after that party, the next day, I recounted the entire conversation with that psychotherapist on my Facebook. I mean, obviously, just in a small paragraph, you know, like a couple of paragraphs of like, this is what happened and this is what I did as a child. And straight away, another friend, Facebook friend, and who is also actually a friend, a physical friend, who I know personally, he commented that he used to do exactly the same when he was a child. And he had a very traumatic childhood. And he used to do exactly the same before he could go to sleep. And this man, you know, a professional person, very highly accredited and respected in his field of work and by his family and friends, you know, and we both of us later when we met discussed it and said, you know, isn't it astounding? So, you know, we obviously realised that it wasn't just us individually that had to do that, and we, up until that time, had never met anybody that had actually done that. And he was as delighted as I was on hearing about it. He was as delighted as me. I was like, wow, so it wasn't just something odd about me, that I had to do that every night, you see. And so now, more recently, just in the last few days, a mutual friend, well, an acquaintance of mine, but a close friend of my friend, so, you know, we share a mutual friend. We were having a 3-way conversation on the phone, you know, the phone was on speaker, and this friend of my friend, you know, the acquaintance, was talking, raving about this new EMDR therapy, and how he'd only just discovered that he's actually suffering trauma, and he started learning about this EMDR, and he's been doing this EMDR therapy, and how wonderful it is and how amazing it is. And, you know, they don't know exactly why it works, but it works, and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, I mean, I've survived trauma. I live with chronic complex PTSD. I have studied human psychology, child psychology. I've trained in person-centred counselling. And so, you know, I was discussing with him exactly what I've just explained about myself and my friend and what we experienced as children, and that we used to do this, and also expressed my concern, actually, that these psychotherapists have obviously developed this technique through learning from studying traumatised children and adults, but mostly survivors of childhood trauma, that through studying them and studying their coping strategies and mechanisms, that then they've developed this therapy out of it that they're then selling, but they have given no credit whatsoever to the children, the child psychologies that had instinctively, out of natural human intelligence, developed this themselves as little children. I was 3. My friend was also very young, 4, 5 years old, which is from when he can remember having to do it. So there was no promotion of that, of that learning that would have brought so many children together, like it brought myself and my friend a lot closer together, that suddenly we had this deep childhood experience that now we realised, we're being told, is actually was so important and fundamental to our development into sane adults, as sane as we could be, having to survive the trauma that we did, that we're able to function in this world. And that has now been appropriated by psychotherapists and being sold as a top therapy, but no credit whatsoever given to the human children that's all been actually developed from. None whatsoever. And so, I expressed a little bit of that, not as in deep detail as I've just given here, but I said, I do find it disturbing that these top psychotherapists are studying child abuse, child trauma survivors and developing this, but they've not given any credit to where they've got it from, to the children, that they've learnt that from. And his response to that was, well, I've listened to you for quite a few minutes now, and to be honest, I've learned nothing new. So can you just pass me on to my friend, please? So it was basically, F off, you're nobody. Actually, you're ill. You're mentally ill yourself with PTSD. I don't need to listen to you. I now want to explain. He said, I now want to talk to my friend about the tools of how this works. You see, the tools of how to do this. And so you go away. And, I felt really insulted. And it did re-trigger, memories of being a child and going through the stages of reporting the crimes that had been committed against me as a child to police and social services, and it all being trivialised, and basically me being told that what I had to do was to learn how to forgive my dad and to rebuild a relationship with him. A man who, there was no father-daughter relationship to rebuild, because I had always only ever been his toy. So it was basically, just go back to being a toy and just forgive him. Let him do what he likes to you and just forgive him. Which is a totally ridiculous concept of forgiveness, because forgiveness does not come without remorse, regret, genuine apology, even some attempts at recompense. Okay? But no, you just get this label, you're an unforgiving person. So basically, and the fact that I'd been talking to this individual about my own experiences of trauma, but I can just be casually dismissed, oh, go away. Yeah, all right, you did it as a child, so you say. Don't really believe you. Don't believe your friend either. Okay, because you're not professional people. I only believe in these professional people now, these professional psychotherapists. They have my full attention, my full admiration. This is fantastic, it's amazing, it works. But we won't give any of that credit to the human child. And that is the world that we are living in. And that is the world that creates these professionals that then act as middlemen between adults and our relationships with our children, that tell us what a child is and how we should respond to children and what we should do with children. They don't understand what a child is, except to steal from the child in a way, because it is theft. It is theft to take something, to not give any credit for that. Because, you know, the world that we live in, life is a barter situation, isn't it? It's like, all right, you take from that hand and you give back with that hand. It is a give and take situation. So if you're going to take something from the experiences of traumatised children, how traumatised children have managed to cope with severe, extreme anxiety. And, you know, we're looking at children, like, for example, children living in Palestine and other war zone areas on our planet. And how to help those children, how those children are coping. How do they cope with the trauma? Do they have to consciously perform rapid eye movement every night so that they can go to sleep and actually develop into a sane human being, into a sane adult? Traumatised, yes. But actually sane enough to function, sane enough to understand things in a balanced, reasonable way, sane enough to learn. So what did these therapists give back to children? Nothing, actually. They couldn't even give the child brain the credit. Instead, all credit must go to these top academic psychotherapists, mustn't it? That, oh, you know, we aren't capable of doing this ourselves. You must go to Harley Street, London, and learn how to do this. And we'll ignore the fact that little children do it, because that's neither here nor there. They're not professionals. And the survivors that can remember doing that, we're not professional psychotherapists. You know, we don't need to listen to you. Go away. And to be actually told that by somebody that's raving about this, to be actually told, well, I've learnt nothing new from you. And it's like, oh, right, so you knew then that children of age 3 who are suffering severe trauma do this then? You knew that? No, he didn't. But he couldn't even give me that. He couldn't even say, well, that's very interesting. Wow, I didn't. You know, he was only interested in his technique now that he's using, and only interested in this. And it's that trivialisation that we, as a society, as a global consciousness now, and even a corporate consciousness, inflicts on children of, you know, that judgment of children as a minor human being. That is the legal definition of a child. And until we can change that legal definition of a child, there is going to be no progress on this planet, none whatsoever. They can develop as much new technology as they like. It's all going to be abusive, damaging, destructive technology. That is going to be the results of it, because it is AI. The AI they are creating is an AI created by a maligned intelligence and psychology that does not even understand a human child, has no respect for a human child, considers a human child as insignificant, trivial and unimportant, and that crimes against children are insignificant, trivial and unimportant, and crimes against, and the people that, you know, the suffering a child endures is minor suffering, because everything to do with the child is a minor concern. Economic policy. How's austerity going to impact children? We don't need to think about that. It's a minor concern. And I think the other thing that we need to understand, you know, because I'm not totally against professionals per se, because I do understand that actually in any given area you'll find professionals that support one theory and professionals that support another theory, and there will be clashes and challenges, and that we need to apply a sense of democracy in all areas of life, that it's not just about political spheres, it's about social, it's about medical, it's about educational, it's about financial, that there needs to be a democratic approach, and that should include professionals, that the bulk of professionals who oppose or offering alternative debates to a handful of cherry-picked professionals that are serving a government narrative that itself is corrupted through its own maligned involvement and interest within a corporate control syndicate that also controls the mainstream media and then has influences in academia. So then you've got them people, and then you've got the people like myself who are semi-professional, educated, experienced, but not professional, but we can all be ignored. You see, we can just be ignored because we're not a professional person. I'm not a professional person. Go away. Until you've written a book, you're actually nobody. What you have to say, what you've learnt, what you think, it means nothing unless you've got so many letters after your name. Basically, we'll treat you are actually, even though you're an adult, you are actually a minor human being, and everything that you've got to say is of minor significance. And, you know, that is it. You know, that has been my problem my entire life, is that I am a minor person. I'm a minor side of man as a female. I'm a minor individual in society as a non-professional. I'm also a minor member of the public because, you know, I've survived severe childhood trauma and abuse. And that has left me damaged physically and emotionally. But nonetheless, I have survived that through using techniques like Emdr from childhood, including imagining nice scenes and thinking of happy things, all the things that are described here. That's exactly how I survived. Reading fairy tales, thinking nice things. That was how I survived. That's how my friends survived. To the extent that, yes, we bear the scars. We are damaged in some ways, but we have learned from that experience enough that we don't repeat that. We don't repeat those patterns of abuse. That we strive to do better. And as a species, as a society, at the moment, we're not striving to do better. They think, these professionals and the corporations now that are backing the cherry-picked ones, you know, they think progress is a new piece of technology, when actually that technology reflects regression. It actually reflects a regressive consciousness, because you can't progress. We will never progress as a species until we start fully appreciating the natural, innate intelligence, pure intelligence of our children, until we understand that an education system isn't about drumming numbers and facts into a child's head, what is deemed as a fact, but actually allowing that child to express themselves naturally and to develop what is there, what is inherently there within that child, what is their understanding, what is their vocation, what interests that child, rather than trying to force them into, oh, well, you know, you either fit into these square pegs, otherwise, you know, you're not quite as intelligent. Which is what is happening to far too many children. Because we're living in a world that does not understand what a child is. But it is a world that nonetheless is seeking to genetically modify our DNA. Okay? Now, tell me, where does that compute? How does that compute as progress in a world of adults that do not even understand a child, that the best even the top psychotherapists can do is steal survival strategies, techniques of little children. What they knew, their brain naturally knew how to do to survive, is to appropriate that method themselves and claim and then sell it on Harley Street as a new form of therapy to treat anxiety, and no credit whatsoever, no even a mention of the children that they obviously learnt that from. And I know they did, because I know I did that at the age of 3, and so does my friend, who, like I say, if you don't, you know, and I know that must be lots more people out there, you know. And I will say that one thing for Facebook, I know people give a lot of have a lot of negative things to say about Facebook, and you know, I do agree that the stuff with Cambridge Analytica, the sharing of people's data, all very, very wrong, censorship. But, you know, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because Facebook has done some amazing things in bringing people together and allowing people to share information and to discuss things on a level that we've never been able to do. You know, until I heard of this therapy, until I'd spoken about it openly on Facebook, you know, I would never have known that my friend had been through exact same thing and had done exact same thing as a child. And how many more people out there that have done it. And that's why I know for almost 100% sure that these psychotherapists have developed this. They don't understand it. As that psychotherapist told me, they did not understand how it works, but they knew it was a survival strategy, that the children that had probably fared the best psychologically, sanity, balance-wise, were the ones that had consciously had to do this rapid eye movement and other things like imagining nice things. That learning from them, basically treating us like animals in a lab, engages. Oh, we've studied these animals and this is what we've learned. Aren't we fantastic? But absolutely nothing at all given to the children, the inverted commas animals, the minor human beings. And as I say, there's no progress. We cannot trust professionalism alone. We just can't. We need to look within professionalism. Well, when I say professionals alone, I'm talking about professionals as presented, cherry-picked professionals as presented by a syndicate that have all got vested interests. They've all got their fingers in the same jar. Corporate interests. Selling vaccines, selling therapies, selling this, selling that, wanting greater control over people, basically wanting to own and control the entire planet and impose a restrictive society on future generations. And we're talking about adults that have grown up in an entirely abusive world, that themselves have grown up being judged minor human beings, who've obviously grown up thinking, yes, well, now I'm a superior human being because I'm a man, I'm a professional, I'm white. You know, all these things have come into play to this very moment of this very day. And that's why I say 2021 has to be the year of the child. It has to be a year where, you know, we stop traumatising children, where we take steps to make sure that children are raised in happy, loving families, that we find other ways than adding more trauma to children. You know, there's children being torn away from actually loving family homes because there's been a professionally identified future emotional risk. Imagine putting a child through such terrible trauma as being dragged away from their parents and community to go and live with absolute strangers because a professional has identified a future emotional risk in the family home because mum has a learning difficulty, say. That why instead we can't actually invest time and energy then into making sure that the future emotional risk is eradicated. What are the problems then that you think this child might be at a future emotional risk? So let's address that. Let's change our education system from this Victorian approach, because we're still teaching children in a Victorian approach, and now it's becoming corporatised. School, what they called academies. It's like we need to fundamentally readdress our concept of what a child actually is. You know, children are not stupid. It is time that we appreciated their natural intelligence that is unfettered by adult egotisms. And that often you can get pure responses, a pure understanding and pure balance from children. It is time we started talking to children and listening to them. And it is, you know, I find it very, very disturbing that as an adult, an experienced adult, even somebody who's professionally trained in person-centred counselling, can be just casually brushed aside like, oh, go away, you know. I've actually learnt nothing from you because, yeah, all right, he didn't know anything about the fact that 3-year-old children, as a child, a 3-year-old child does this. 4-year-old children are doing this naturally without going to Harley Street, without speaking to a top psychotherapist. You know, apparently that wasn't learning anything because it doesn't mean anything because it came from me, a non-professional person, and I'm not a psychotherapist. And bearing in mind that a psychotherapist in my family, as far as I'm aware from reports from his victim survivors, has actually abused children. And that it is known that psychiatry, you know, these professional people have abused children. Cognitive behaviour therapy, CBT, was developed through, it's a whole therapy that was actually developed through abusing children. That was how it was developed, through actually abusing children. Okay? And this EMDR has been developed, I am, as I say, almost 100% sure it's been developed through studying adults that have survived child abuse or children and talking to them. But no credit whatsoever given to those children, no credit given to our natural human intelligence. And it is our natural human intelligence that is at risk here, because we're being taken over by a corporate intelligence that cherry picks whatever it wants out of intelligence in order purely to serve its own agendas. And it is a form of theft, and it's a theft that is far greater than the billions that and trillions that they've thieved off us, especially this last year. I mean, we're talking trillions, literally thieved off the future generations in order to shore up a load of bankrupt corporations and banks and politicians, governments that have failed time and time again, because they are so unintelligent and they rely so thoroughly on their cherry-picked individuals who they think give them short-term gains. We're talking short-term gains without any regard for the long term. And, you know, it is outrageous. And again, as I say, we're at that stage now where they are actually threatening to re-edit our DNA, you know, to genetically modify humanity. And there is actually a legal argument now, it is being discussed legally, about the possibility that humans, once we've been genetically modified, could actually be patented as human beings and belong to a corporation, a pharmaceutical corporation. I mean, these are serious issues. And so, you know, I ask people, please, this year, let's make it the year of the child, 2021, the year of the child, the 21st year of the 21st century, when we as adults look back, remember our child, our inner child. We hold the hand of our inner child. We learn and respect that child, and we pass that respect on to the living children of our planet today. And we vow to give them a future worth living. And we uphold their right to be considered developing human beings. And as such, VIPs, every single one of them, wherever they are, whether they're in Palestine, Iraq, England, America, South America, every single child is a VIP, and we do everything we can to help every single child on our planet and to raise them up to the level that they deserve. That is their right, that we as human beings give the best to our children of our species, and that we have it erased from the legal dictionary of legal definitions, that a child is not a minor human being, that a child shall be legally defined as a developing human being, and therefore a very important person. So thank you for taking the time to listen, and love and God bless to everybody.